Paul. I'm an alcoholic.
Oh.
Let's see. My home group is the Common Solution. Meets at Riverside Methodist on Zollinger Road in Columbus, 8:30 on Mondays. Start out by giving a little background. Just come from a middle-class family. I was born and raised in Clintonville, just north of OSU campus. Go Bucks. Went through Columbus City Schools, and I was a pastor's kid. So religion was really like the structure that formed everything about my life. It was what formed the compass that I used to navigate everything. When I say it was my life, I mean it was everything. It was what clothes I wore, what cartoons I could watch, how much facial hair I could have, and whether or not I could say "bless you" when somebody sneezed. Yeah, and it wasn't just Sundays and holidays. It was every Sunday, 2 evening services a week, a home Bible study, and then going out door to door preaching on Saturday mornings. So that's important. It's going to come up again. I dropped out of school, left that religion, and moved out when I was 17 years old. And I was looking to experience the world. I'd been sheltered my whole life, and I just wanted to experience the world. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do stuff, but I didn't make it very far. I didn't really go anywhere unless it involved parties, drugs. So on my 20th birthday, I met a girl, got her pregnant, married her after knowing her for 8 months, had a nice little shotgun wedding. So here I am, newly married. I've got a stepson, and I've got a newborn baby boy, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had been given this broken compass, and I threw it away. So I'm trying to figure out how to navigate life. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I thought I wanted to be a good father, and I wanted to be a good husband, and I had no idea how. Let's go to church, right? So that's what I did. I was looking for new structure. I was looking for a new compass. And so I completely sold out to it. I quit doing drugs, found myself a good job, had some more kids, was trying for one more, and that was going to be it, but then we had twins. And then not long after that, we had a surprise. So those are my Irish triplets. And I went back to school. I started going to college. I got my degree. And I was studying to be a pastor. Like I said, I was sold out. Again, that's going to come up later, so just remember that. In regards to my drinking, so anyway, this gets me up to about the age of 30, okay? In regards to my drinking, I never had an off button. I was an infrequent binge drinker. I would just drink until I puked and passed out, but I didn't do it very often. It wasn't all the time. But then something changed. Can't really identify exactly what it was. Maybe it was finishing college. I don't know. I started to drink more often. I realized that I could drink without puking or passing out. So pretty soon I was drinking every night. Started right after work, and it just continued until I fell asleep, because I didn't have an off button. So I don't know if my marriage was getting worse because of my drinking, or if I was drinking more because my marriage was getting worse, or maybe it's both. I don't know. But yeah, things just went on that way for a handful of years. By now I'm up to about 35. And started having struggles with that church that I was in. Was not able to live up to anyone's expectations or standards. And I was a constant failure. And I was just tired of failing, so I left that church. Again, broken compass, threw it away. So by this time I had discovered that I could drink liquor every night and still get up in the morning and go to work. So that went on for a while, and I couldn't go home after work without stopping at the bar first. I couldn't face the stuff at home without getting a little lubrication. And everything was revolving around liquor. I had to have it on hand. It had to be in the cabinet, or I would start to panic. And so yeah, about this period of time, things started to go downhill really quick. Lost my job. I was fired. My job performance was terrible. I really don't blame them. Like, when I showed up, I was a wreck. I was having daytime withdrawals every day. I couldn't focus. I would show up late if I showed up at all. My marriage was beyond being on the rocks. And my mother-in-law passed away of pancreatic cancer. She did her hospice palliative care in my home. And then my mother got sick, got diagnosed with multiple myeloma, stage 4. It was pretty advanced. And my doctor told me that I had type 2 diabetes. So it was low-carb diet and take these pills. Well, there's carbs in beer, so I just didn't eat anything. I was saving my carbs so I could have my beer after work. Yeah, I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any compass. All I had was my liquor. And I started to realize that maybe this wasn't good, and I had checked out AA. The first time I think I made it 2 weeks, and then I was back at it. I mean, I was smarter. I was smarter than that. I could figure it out. I could control it. My life wasn't that unmanageable. So one day, the fighting with my wife got so bad that the cops were called, and I ended up in jail. And divorce papers were filed, and I became an every other weekend dad, which I never wanted. But then the drinking just intensified. I didn't have that anchor to go home to. I didn't have kids to take care of. It was just me and my bottles. So I'm back living with my parents, but I'm usually crashing, with the latest victim that I've picked up, whatever the flavor of the week was. That's where I'm crashing, because I didn't want to be home because my mom was sick. She was at home sick, doing palliative care, hospice. And then, my mom passed away. And so it just intensified even more. And at this point, I'm dating this really sweet, enabling, codependent nurse. And she convinced me to try rehab. And, she told me that, detoxing wasn't safe to do on my own. So I made it about 5 days at Parkside, enough to safely detox, and I was quickly out of there so I could still control it. Yeah, I was there long enough to just get through the detox and get through a few meetings. And it was at that point that I, was fired from that job that I was talking about. I skipped ahead, sorry. So then I wake up in the hospital. I had a tube down my throat. I was intubated, and I had been in a coma for a week. Stuff leading up to that is pretty hazy. I know that I felt like I had the flu. I was puking a lot. I was dehydrated, still drinking. So yeah, I spent another 2 weeks in the hospital recovering, so a total of 3 weeks in the hospital, and I had dried out because I didn't have any choice. And my sister was in recovery, and she's like, surely this is his bottom. So she took me to a few meetings. But yeah, it turns out that I was actually type 1 diabetic. I had to have insulin injections, and I had no idea. I didn't know it. So my blood sugar was over 850. It's supposed to be around 100. And my organs were failing. My body was shutting down on me. So I start going to meetings with my sister. I did step 1 and 2. Didn't have a problem with those, but I didn't get a sponsor. I only went to open meetings. I wasn't doing any real work. I was just sticking around and hoping, hoping that it would stick without making any effort, really. And I made it about 4 months. And I went back to drinking, and it was different this time because this time I knew that I had a problem. I was fully aware that I was an alcoholic. I knew that this was going to be as good as it was going to get. But I was still fully devoted to this idea of this finding a way to drink without consequences. I was still stuck on that. So that's what I did. So I started this new pattern. I would drink only beer and smoke a lot of weed, do a lot of other drugs. But eventually, inevitably, I went back to liquor. And then my blood sugar would get out of control, my glucose and, diabetes was not managed well. I was starting to get pancreatitis. And the first symptom of pancreatitis is nausea. So I would vomit, get dehydrated, couldn't hold down any water, continue to drink, and then I would end up back in ketoacidosis. It's when the acid level of your blood rises so high that it starts to kill your organs. And so I'd go into the hospital because I knew this was happening. I'd been taught the warning signs the first time. So I would end up back in the hospital, and then, rinse and repeat. I would get out, and I would tell myself that I can control this, and I'm just going to stick to beer, and the cycle just started over again. That went on for years. I got fired from multiple jobs, series of broken relationships. For some reason, none of those relationships were saving me. Nothing was working out. I was burning bridges like there was no tomorrow. At this point, I had gone into that coma in September of 2017. And there was hardly anybody left in my life. And I was the loneliest that I had ever been. Because I had to hide, I guess. A lot of shame. Yeah, so I lost count how many times that cycle repeated. I lost count how many times I ended up in the hospital. I do know that in 2020, in a period of 6 months, I was admitted to the hospital 5 times. And the last time was absolutely miserable. The pancreatitis had gotten so bad that it felt like there was a knife lodged in my spine. That's the only way that I know how to describe it. But I wanted to die. I literally wanted to die. I didn't want to do it anymore. But I got out, that last time, and I continued to drink. And COVID hits, we're on lockdown, and I thought, this was a great time to buy a gun. Gotta be prepared, right? Don't know what's gonna happen, right? So I had started dating that sweet, enabling nurse again. We had plans to move in together, and I had a contract job, nice little short-term gig where I could really be autonomous, but I was working from home, so I was able to drink every day, all day. I thought I was really good at hiding it. Holidays are rolling around, and I got fired from that job. And then, this nurse, she doesn't want to enable me anymore. She doesn't want to move in together anymore. So I spent Thanksgiving alone, eating takeout, Chinese food, and I was just plowing through whiskey, Canadian Club. I woke up the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and I finished the drink that was still there next to me from the night before, and I really had to power through that one because the nausea was coming back. I really had to force it down, and I knew I had done this so many times. I knew it was the pancreatitis. The back pain was starting up again, and I knew I was headed back to the hospital. So I poured another whiskey. Gotta have one more before I go back to the hospital, right? And I just stared at it. I stared at it, and I thought about it, and I thought about that pistol that I just bought. Yep, stared for a long time, thinking about that drink and that pistol, and wondering if I had any other options. So I really wish that I had a clear memory of it, but I don't. What I do know is that I poured out the rest of that liquor, and I decided to go to a meeting, and I slept a lot. So now, that was Saturday. Now it's Monday, and I got online and I looked at the AA directory, and I found a meeting that, even though it's COVID, it looks like this meeting's still meeting in person. It's Monday, 7:30. I show up at this meeting. There's a sign on the door. No meeting. I almost went home. I don't know why I didn't. Instead, I got my phone out and I found another meeting. It wasn't too far away. It was at 8:30. It was coming up. It was soon. So I went. And that meeting is now my home group. Common Solution, 8:30 Monday nights. Zollinger Road in Columbus. So yeah, that was the weirdest thing, because I had been to some meetings before. This was a room full of guys that were really relating to each other. This is the weirdest thing. So after the meeting, we close the meeting, and everybody gets some more coffee and sits back down. I had never seen that before. So I got some phone numbers. I got a big book. I got a sponsor. He had me read the book. We were off and running, and I was just soaking everything in. That's great. So I learned a lot. Especially in the beginning. I learned about choice and control. I had neither. One of the phone numbers I got, I called this guy, and I'll never forget what he told me. Let's see if I can get this right. He told me, if you had asked me 5 years ago, this guy had 5 years sober, he said, if you had asked me 5 years ago to write out exactly the best possible scenario for my life, I would have sold myself short. I couldn't write things to be better than the way that they are now. Talk about hope, man. That's pretty cool. So I learned that this is a suggested program, but it is not a program of suggestions. I met with my sponsor. He said, we're going to go through the book, and we're going to do the steps the way that they're described in the book. Steps 1 and 2 were not a problem. Not a problem. I was there for a reason. I knew that my life was unmanageable, and I had an idea that if this higher power worked out for these guys, it might work out for me too. But now step 3, now we've run into something. So remember, I said this was going to come up again, and this is where it came up. This was really tough. I'm going to spend some time here. This is an absolutely integral part of my story. For my entire life, religion was my entire life. And it took me a while to realize it, but what it was a group of people, flawed human beings, telling me that their view on God and their view on the world was the absolute truth. Not only that, but that was the only way that I could relate to God. And it was the only way that I could relate to the world around me. And if I didn't agree with them, if I didn't agree and fall in line, then I was cursed. I was cursed by them. I was cursed by God. I was abandoned by them and by God. I was cut off from my family, my friends. So here's how that worked. Okay, so this is a really dangerous combination. Okay, number 1, acceptance was the currency. It was the value system. So it was always on the line. And I'm not talking about accepting the things that happen to you. I'm talking about being accepted by the people around you, the people in your life. And so it was the currency. It was, you were either rich or you were poor. You were either on the inside or you were on the outside. So unless you meet all the requirements, unless you meet all the criteria, and unless you live up to every standard, you're an outcast. Okay, so that was number 1. Now number 2. People had claimed the agency of God. these people were representing God. So what they said to me was coming directly from God. So the lines had been blurred between God and the people that were claiming to be of God. So in my head, the two became the same thing. So when I wasn't performing up to these people's standards, I had failed God. When these people didn't accept me, when these people rejected me, then God was rejecting me. And I'm at step 3. So, maybe you can understand, maybe you can put yourself in that position, but I had commingled people and God. I had confused the love of God with the acceptance of people. And I was angry. I was pissed off. I was hurt. I was angry. And I was resentful. I rejected them and I rejected God. So when I read the chapter, We Agnostics, there's some things that stuck out. It made a huge difference for me. So page 45 and 46, I'm going to paraphrase. If you don't believe me, you can go read it. Some of us hated religion. Some of us were hurt by it. Some of us rejected that particular conception or understanding of God, right? Some of us thought that it was weak and cowardly to have faith or depend on a higher power. But then it continues. It says, some of us found if we could lay all that aside and just be open to the idea, just have a little willingness, and we started to see results. Some of us discovered that we didn't need anyone else's ideas about God. And as soon as some of us admitted this possibility, we got new power, a new direction, provided we took certain steps. So I decided to give this a shot. I threw all of my ideas about God out the window. We're going to start fresh, clean slate. And I just decided to be willing and open to the idea. And my sponsor told me that if I walked through my fear and had a little faith, I would be okay. Not that everything would be, sunshine and rainbows, fudge brownies and unicorns, right? But I would be okay. So that's what I did, and right away, we get to step 4. Fucking terrifying, man. So that's where I stalled, right? I didn't want to confront my past. I didn't want to write down the things that had been done to me. I didn't want to write down my part, all the things that I had done to other people. That doesn't sound good. But I knew that if I didn't do the work, the alternative was going back to drinking. I knew that I would eventually get there. I wanted a new compass. So I did it. And after it was done, I realized that this was the first time. The first time that I saw results as a result of being willing. It was the first time that I walked through my fear with just a tiny little bit of faith. And not only was I okay, but by the end of step 5, I was having a spiritual experience. And looking back now, I know that that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening. So I zipped through 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I got to 9, and there was that fear again, right? But this time I had something different. I had something to fall back on. I call it a notch in my big book. It's a journal entry, right, in the log book. It's a chapter in the book of a time when I was faced with something hard, something scary, and I did it anyway, and I was okay, and God had my back. So, even though I was terrified, I completed the 9th step. Again, I was okay. Wasn't fudge brownies and unicorns, but I was okay. Some people read me the riot act. Imagine that. But I did the work in spite of my fear, and God came through for me. God had my back. So I finished the rest of my steps. All in all, it took about 12 weeks. I just realized that I forgot to tell you my sobriety date, which is November 28th, 2020. So that means I've got a little over 10 months. Things are way different now than they were 10 months ago. I'm learning a lot of really cool things. One of the cool things is thought discipline. There's something that I never had before. I can shut those down. I can turn those off. I don't have to beat myself up continuously when I make mistakes. I get to live in reality, not, the things that I imagine in my brain that are going on. It's not all the terrible things, right? I can see that there are positive things as well, but I can recognize the truth and what's made up, and I can live in that reality, and my thoughts can operate in that reality. I'm learning that I'm not in control, and I don't have to worry about being in control, and that God is in control of the outcomes. All I have to do is the legwork. Sometimes that means just showing up. Excuse me. And I'm learning that life is not a mystery to be solved, but it's a journey to enjoy. And before, I just made myself miserable, right? You think about the survival tools that I had to come up with. So I get to enjoy it without making myself miserable. I'm just learning how to do that, I think, for the first time. I still have fear, but every time I face something scary, I've got notches in my big book. I've got that log book that tells me that it's going to be okay. God's got your back. And now I've recovered from the obsession with alcohol. When things are scary or when I'm telling myself stories, I don't think about drinking. Let's see. I just started a new full-time permanent job. I used to do contracts to try to avoid any real work, real commitment. It's a really great job. I never would have even had the courage to apply for this job, and I ended up getting it. I would have been, never even would have crossed my mind because I would have been so scared of all that responsibility. Because anyway, I've got more time with my kids. I'm not just an every other weekend father anymore. We're taking trips together. We're planning trips together. My oldest son, when he graduated, moved in with me. And just recently, my 14-year-old son moved in with me full time. And I'm getting ready to move into a new place in their school district where they can spend more time with me. They can walk to my house after school. And now I've got a sober family, a real fellowship that the big book talks about. And they love me, and they accept me, and it's not based on my performance. So now I get to learn, and I get to build over time a new concept of God that's based on my experiences and not what anybody else tells me. And that's my freedom. That's my new compass. And I'm just getting started. That's all I got.
Oh, you're supposed to be sitting in the hot seat.
Is this okay? Or do I need to go over there?
It could get hot.
All right.
I'm Jimmy, I'm alcoholic in your stores.